In today's society, good parenting can often feel like swimming upstream, going against much of what culture tells you is the right way to do things. In Meck's latest series, Courageous Parenting, you'll discover how to effectively parent the next generation by looking at best practices that come straight from the Bible and how to have the courage to do it in today's culture. Whether you hope to be a parent one day, or you're in the throes of parenting, or even if you're looking back on your parenting years, this series will be one you don't want to miss.
Welcome to Meck. My name is Robbie. I'm one of our pastors here. I also head up our high school program called Real Life. And today, for our Courageous Parenting series, we move into the realm of parenting high school-aged teenagers. And this is going to be fun because from the start, I'm going to be fully honest with you. I do not have teenagers in my home. I have 4 kids. They're 9, 7, 5, and 3 years old. And as you know, the best advice is given from those who haven't experienced it yet. Financial advice from people in debt, marital advice from people who aren't married, parenting advice from people without kids. These are the people that hold the truth that we are all looking for, right? But let me make a case for you for why I hope you'll hear me out with the message today. I have a heart for high school students. I have over 20 years experience of working with high school age teenagers, and I study youth culture. I interact with teenagers for hours every single week. I talk with them about faith, about life, about their problems, about their joys, about their fears. I interact with parents on a weekly basis about what's going on in their teenagers' world. But the best reason I can think of for my value to you in parenting high school age teenagers is something that I saw in a video that I found recently. So go ahead and check this out.
Kids are so expensive, Dad. Now Katie needs braces.
Maybe try switching your car insurance to Progressive. You can save hundreds.
I don't know, Dad.
Maybe try switching your car insurance to Progressive. You could save hundreds.
It's a great idea, TV Dad.
But I said the exact same thing.
Someday when you're a father, you'll understand.
I'm his father.
It's not a competition.
Listen to your TV Dad. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save nearly $700 on average.
I function just like TV Dad. The most important role I have here at Meck is to partner with parents to say pretty much the same thing you are telling them, but having your kids listen to me instead of you. I'm sorry about that, but it happens pretty much every single week. And before we move on, I need to say that our church neither endorses nor opposes Progressive for your insurance needs, all right? The high school years between ages 14 and 18 are just such a fascinating time. During those years, many high school students will have their first real dating relationship. Many of them will have their first kiss. They get their driver's license. They commit to college or get ready to start a career. They become eligible to vote. Some of them, they can legally start smoking, although I discourage that for 18-year-olds. It's an age of identity. It's an age where students are really discovering who they are, what they really like, what they want to be when they grow up, and what they really believe outside of the influence and upbringing of their parents. But this is also a tough time too. It's a tough time for students because all those firsts come with some growing pains and some failures, right? Their first breakup, their first college rejection letter, their first speeding ticket or traffic accident. And it's tough for parents as well because in the high school years, teenagers are pulling away. They learn to do things on their own without your help, and they choose to disregard your advice and choose to go their own way instead. And they also choose to be with their friends instead of their family. I know the high school years aren't just tough for students, they're tough for you as a parent as well. And that's why this series is called Courageous Parenting, because parenting does take courage. And that's what I want to motivate you to do today. To take courage. Courageous parenting, being courageous isn't just something that you are, it's something that you do, it's something that you take. It doesn't mean that you have no fear, it means moving forward in the face of fear. It's doing the things that you know you need to do as a parent, even though it's scary, even though you are afraid. And as we explore what it looks like to take courage in the parenting series that we're continuing today, we're going to focus on one short passage from Scripture from the Old Testament book of Proverbs in the Bible. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Direct your children onto the right path, and when they're older, they will not leave it." Now, this seems like the best parenting advice that you could have, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. It seems like all the answers to parenting could be found right there. From a young age, lead your kids onto the right path, and then everything's going to go well for them, and it's going to go well for you too as the parent. But any parent of older kids will tell you that it doesn't always work out that way. And they're right. If you've ever read the book of Proverbs in the Bible, it seems like it's written almost like a list of guarantees to the reader. But Proverbs is not meant to be seen as a list of ironclad promises. Rather, Proverbs are supposed to be thought of as principles about how life generally works. When you read Proverbs, you should think of it as identifying probable outcomes based off of spiritual wisdom. An example of a modern-day proverb would be an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Now, this proverb was never meant to say that if you eat an apple every day, you will never get sick. The principle is if you eat healthy, you're probably going to get sick less often, right? So if you're a parent and you're thinking about some of the bad decisions, bad choices your kid, your teenager has made over the years, to go away from God or to go away from what you have been trying to tell them to do and go a different direction, just know that you are the same as every other parent with a similar kind of ratio of successes and failures. What's true is that parents do influence the outcome of their kids, but there also comes a point where your kid or your teenager is going to choose their own way. They're going to make their own decisions to go a different way than what you or God wants them to do. So from the start, if you're a parent and you have felt guilty about this passage, if you've read it before in the past, I really hope that this helps you get some of that guilt off your shoulders. So what I want to do today is expand this verse from Proverbs. Let me read it again. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they're older, they will not leave it. Now, whether you've heard this passage before, or this is your first time hearing it today, this idea of the right path brings up so many different thoughts for all of us when it comes to what does this right path look like when it comes to parenting. So for some parents, this is going to bring up ideas of morality. It's a moral path. The right path is teaching kids not to steal and not to do drugs. That's the right path. For some, it's going to be independence. The right path is teaching kids to be self-sufficient, to do things on their own. For some, it's going to be success. The right path is helping kids to get a good job or to make lots of money. For some people, it's going to be religious. The right path is teaching kids to follow the set of practices and rules of whatever religion that you claim to believe. And now those are all great paths. But what I want to argue today is that none of those paths are what this verse is talking about. If this is my one shot to tell you as a parent of teenagers the right path that this verse is talking about, it's this. The right path is not an idea. It's a person. The right path is Jesus. See, the biggest problem that I see in teen culture and the biggest problem I see in parenting really at any age, and especially during the teenage years, is that we suffer from believing that all the answers to our biggest problems is found in everything else rather than Jesus. So for instance, if you lack peace in your life, you can find that peace from money or in your career. If you want love, you can find that in sex. If you're missing joy, you just need to drink more and go to more parties. If you crave acceptance, you can change your identity to find a community that affirms who you are. If you need to make better decisions, better choices, there's a support group to help you with that aligns you with people that have the same problem that you're dealing with. If you're anxious, there's a book that we can give you called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. You know, there are so many things that we go to, that we turn to try to fix our problems. And some of them are not that bad. Some of them are actually great. You know, books are great. Therapy is super helpful. Support groups are actually something that God uses to help people who are in need. But as I grow in my faith journey, my personal journey, the more I'm realizing that the source of every good and perfect thing, everything I'm lacking, any void that I think I have in my life, any way I'm deficient, any way that I need to grow, everything good and true and perfect is found in Jesus. Jesus is the source of everything good in this world. Everything else may fill the gap for a little bit, but everything else is always going to come up short. In the book of John, Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." Now, that's a claim that's commonly understood to be about salvation, but salvation is not just some distant destination in the future that you go to after you die. What Jesus is also referring to is that salvation is also right here and right now. It's this life. It's this life lived with and for Jesus and the purposes that he has in this world. See, the right path is the path that leads to Jesus because Jesus is the way. And my fellow parents, this directing teenagers down the right path that leads to Jesus takes an amazing amount of courage. But you see, in my experience with teenagers over the years, I know that our teenagers simply don't see Jesus as a primary path for their life. He's more of a side project or a last resort when there's nobody else to turn to. You as the parent are going to have to lead the way on this one. If you've ever flown on an airplane, you know the safety instructions. You know if that in case of extreme turbulence, masks from the ceiling are going to drop down to provide oxygen. And then what do they tell you next? They tell you first, secure that mask on yourself before helping those around you. And parenting is a time of extreme turbulence. Can I get an amen? But as I share today, what I want you to know is that I know there's going to be things that come up where you know that you need to work on this in your life. And that's okay, because we're all a work in progress and we all have got a ways to go. What I want to tell you to do is take courage to work on yourself. Work on your own life, grow in your own faith, and the effort that you put into your faith and growing in answering your questions about who Jesus is and how you live for him. That's going to help your teenager as well. So direct your children onto the right path. And when they're older, they will not leave it. The right path is the path that leads to Jesus. See, our path should move towards Jesus and then branch out from Jesus into every other area of life. Everything else that we could turn to is a temporary fix. No other path is long-lasting. No other path is eternal. And I want to challenge you to lead your teen on the path that leads to Jesus, because if you don't lead your teen, someone else will. And I'm not saying this is a good thing. If you're not leading your teen, do you know who else is? Google would be happy to lead your teenager. TV and social media are probably already doing it. Biased news outlets, QAnon, deepfakes, pornography, celebrities, all these things, all these people are trying to lead your teenager in a direction in one way or another. And teenagers are at an age where they're starving for that direction. The world is opening up for them with brand new opportunities. Their bodies have developed to be able to perform adult actions. Their brains are comprehending abstract thought. Their faith is being challenged in ways beyond what they've ever experienced before. And they're often given adult responsibilities without adult wisdom. So if you don't take the courage to lead your teen, somebody else is going to do that job for you. And if somebody else is leading your teenager, I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to like where they are leading them. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to assume that you want to lead your teenager. You want to influence them in their life and in their faith. You want to protect them. You want to see them succeed and thrive. You don't want to leave their destiny to someone else who's going to direct them towards God knows what for their life. So let's do this. Let's talk about parenting in a way that leads to your kids to Jesus during the teen years. So first, what I want to do is I want to strongly encourage you to go back and listen to the other messages in the series. They were focused not necessarily on the high school years, but everything that our pastors talked about really does relate specifically to teenagers as well. And there was going to be some overlap today that we've already heard from other pastors. But what I did in preparation for this message is I connected with about 20 or so parents from high school students from a lot of different family backgrounds: biological parents, single parents, blended families, parents with adopted teenagers, parents of current high school students, parents of former high school students. And after all these conversations, what I tried to do was pull together 3 ways that I noticed where parents of teenagers specifically can take courage to lead their teenager in the right path that leads to Jesus. And here they are. Take courage to swim into the anemone, take courage to open the can, and take courage to throw the Hail Mary. I hope you're intrigued, so let's dive in. First, take courage to swim into the anemone. Sea anemones are flower-like marine animals with neurotoxin-filled stinging tentacles, and they use these stinging tentacles to subdue their prey like crab and fish and jellyfish. Anemones are particularly close to one kind of fish. Clownfish are immune to sea anemone stings. Scientists believe that there's a filmy layer on their bodies that protects these fish from the stings. This means that clownfish can safely nestle into the dangerous tentacles to hide from predators that are attacking them. Now, in return, clownfish help the anemone in multiple ways. They keep them free from parasites and provide them with nutrients. Clownfish may also drive off intruders. Now, sea anemones that harbor clownfish appear to have faster growth rates and lower mortality rates than those that don't harbor fish, along with so many other benefits that you can look up. But this is called a mutual symbiotic relationship, where 2 different organisms are benefiting each other. And now I think I I think you understand where I'm going to be going with this. Because during the younger years of parenting, there's a lot of direct involvement, hand-holding, telling them what to do, doing it for them, sheltering your young kids from the outside world. And what I've seen and what I've talked with parents about is over the years, parents feel like parenting teenagers requires the exact opposite of all of that. In the parenting of teenagers, I see parents step out completely, or they regret stepping out completely, or they let their teenager take charge. They stop disciplining. They stop trying to be involved in the teenager's life. They do what Michael Scott from The Office does, and he says, I don't get why parents are always complaining about how tough it is to raise kids. You joke around with them, you give them pizza, you give them candy, you let them live their lives. They're adults, for God's sake. The problem is, they're not adults. I know teenagers hate to hear this, but they're still kids. Technically, legally, and experientially, they're still kids. And teenagers need parents to swim into the anemone, to be integrated into their lives in mutually beneficial ways. Parents, you can guide your teenager where they're inexperienced. You can help them with all of their firsts over the teen years. You give them direction. You lead them in faith. You provide a safe place to risk and to fail. And parents, teenagers help you too. They remind you what it looks like to dream. They remind you what it looks like to live with passion. They remind you what it looks like to care for friends. And they also fix your internet when it goes out. Your teenager is an emerging adult, but they're not an adult yet. They still have a ways to go. They still have experiences that need direction and guidance. And remember, if you don't lead your teenager, someone else will. So, what does it look like to swim into the anemone? Here's a few ideas that I've had from observations. First, lean in when they're pushing away. Lean in when your teenager is pushing you away. So parents, here's what I know about almost every single teenager, probably including yours. Your teen does not think they need you. They directly or indirectly have told you that they don't want you around. They want their privacy. They don't believe that you were once a teenager dealing with the same problems that they're experiencing, and they know absolutely everything. Developmentally, this is natural. If you think back to your teen years, you were probably this way as well. It just hurts more when you're the parent in the relationship. So regardless of what they say or do, they still need you. They need you to take courage to lean in when they're trying to push you away. They need you to initiate hard and deep conversations. They need you to give them advice, but more importantly, to give you advice when they ask for it. They need you to care. They need to know that they are loved. They need you to tell them that it's going to be okay when they fail. They need you to lead the way and point the way to Jesus. The problem is, I know this from watching from a distance, but like the sea anemone, teenagers have stinging tentacles, don't they? They know exactly how to find and expose your weakness, and they have the potential to hurt you. But unlike the clownfish, you're not immune to their stings. And I'm sorry if that's what your experience has been with the teenage years, but that's why this takes so much courage. You need to identify where your teen needs to be guided and where they need to be directed, even though they're trying to push you away, because you do need to lean in when they're pushing away. But you don't have to do this alone. Another idea for swimming into the anemone is invite strategic people to swim in with you. Now, I truly believe that you are the best parent possible that your teenager can have. And I believe this because God gave you the kids that you have, the teen that you have in your home. Regardless of the mistakes that you've made in your parenting, God gave you those kids. But that doesn't mean that God wants or needs you to be everything that your teenager needs. You don't need to be everything you don't need to have all the experiences under your belt. You don't need to have all the answers. And I keep coming back to this saying, if you don't lead your teen, someone else will. But if left to chance, it will not go well to randomly let somebody else come into your teenager's life to influence them in the way that God wants them to go. But if you take some time and some intentionality, you could really bring some strategic people into your teenager's life that helps reinforce what you're trying to do in your teen's life, and also help you in ways that you might be weak or areas that you can't help. An aunt or an uncle or a friend with a strong faith that's in your family's life can be an amazing influence to your teenager. A teacher in the Meck Institute, here at Meck, could help your teen understand money or prayer or the Bible in ways that you might not feel confident right now. And a real life leader could really help your teenager process the thoughts and feelings that they're going through in their life before that teenager might be ready to tell their parents. And let me take this as a minute to just do a shameless plug, all right? The high school years are just so ripe with potential to help lead teenagers onto the right path to Jesus. And at Real Life, our high school ministry here at Meck, we try to do that every single week. And we have an amazing team that helps out with that. But if you have a heart for students and you like what you hear so far and you want to be a part of leading students down the right path that leads to Jesus, we would love to have you. Bring it on, all right? There are ways that you can serve both online and in person, and we'd love to have you. So email reallife@mecklenburg.org and we'll hook you up with all those details. All right, back to it. We're all limited. We're all weak in certain areas. Admit it. Ask for help. And also don't be afraid to grow in those areas of weakness alongside of your teenager. Listen in when that aunt or uncle or friend is talking to that your teenager. Take the class, the Meck Institute class with them. Serve at Real Life alongside your teenager. All right. The bottom line is you should choose who you want to help lead your teen down the right path. Don't leave it to chance. Invite strategic people to swim into the anemone with you. All right. One more way that you can swim into the anemone is collaborate rather than combat. Now, a while back, I was talking to a dad of a teenager, and he was having such a tough time talking to his teenage daughter about her screen time on her cell phone. He was just at a loss of how to direct her in this process. And as we were talking, I was telling him what I've known from my experience with teenagers. They don't like being told what to do, but no adult really likes being told what to do. No teenager likes it either. But when they want something, when they truly believe in something, they will do it. And I had an idea in this conversation. I said, you know what? Why don't you have your daughter do a research project? Why don't you have her research and figure out, to provide for you what details she has to support the screen time, the amount of screen time that she wants in her life, and give her a due date and tell her you would gladly listen to her presentation on why she thinks she should have the amount of screen time that she wants. So he tried it. He was collaborative with his daughter instead of combative, instead of fighting her about it, and it worked. His daughter, through her research, realized that the screen time she was doing was not great for her, and she naturally limited her screen time on her own. And now I can't guarantee that this is always going to work out that way, but I really do believe that collaborating with your teenager will have so much more success than combating, than constantly fighting them. And it's because as adults, we know what we want our kids to do. But in a world of teenagers, what an adult wants for them is not necessarily what they want for themselves. They really do need to believe it. They need to come to that decision on their own for it to really stick with them. And you as a parent can effectively guide them in those decisions if you collaborate with them. This doesn't always have to be a research project. This can be just done over conversations around the dinner table or in the car. You can just talk and bring it up and collaborate about almost everything. What does it look like for us to have a good relationship with Jesus? Let's talk about that and see where we can help each other out. What does meaningful family time look like? How many times should we have dinner together? When can we do something fun together? How much personal information should I share online? Let's collaborate about this. I'm not going to fight you about this, but let's see what's healthy and what's good for us. With teenagers, it's more effective than fighting from a distance. Telling what to do from the outside is swimming into the anemone, and collaborating and working together and letting them be a part of the conversation. So that's swimming into the anemone. So let's move on. The next idea of how to apply our Proverbs passage to lead your teenager is to take courage to open the can. Now, you've probably heard of the phrase, open a can of worms, right? In case you haven't heard of this, it's to open a can of worms means to create a complicated situation from doing when you're trying to correct a problem that leads to many more problems after that. And so from observation, I think parents are very much afraid to open up a can of worms with their teenager. And I'll admit I'd be a bit afraid as well. If you ask the wrong question, if you see the wrong text message, if you discover the wrong search history, if you open the bedroom door at the wrong time, yikes, right? It has the potential to create not just one problem, it can create so many more problems on top of that for the future. Ignorance is really bliss when it comes to parents and teenagers. The less you know as a parent, the less you have to deal with. But the less you have to deal with, the less direction you give your teenager. And if you're not leading your teen, what did I say? Someone else will, right? To open a can of worms, you need to ask the right questions. And here's the best advice that I've been given, so this isn't original to me, when it comes to asking questions of teenagers. Ask general questions to get general answers. Ask specific questions to get specific answers. Now, what I want to do is I want to call these specific questions worm can questions. Worm can questions have the potential to create more complicated situations with your teenager, but they can also help give you a better insight into what your teenager is feeling, what they're thinking, what's going on in their world, what they're struggling with, and just what's happening in their life. Now, you're not going to have all the answers to worm can conversations, but what you can do is you can tell your teenager during this conversation, you know what, thank you so much for sharing. Let's find the answer to this question together. So let's do some worm can questions, all right? Let's do some examples. And let's start with some spiritual stuff. Here are some worm can questions related to faith. Don't ask what they learned in church today, what they learned in real life this week. Ask, what is something that you disagreed with from the message that you heard today? Or you can ask, can you describe for me what it means to follow Jesus? And after they describe something or say they don't know, say, does that life match up to your life? Does your life match that description? Here's another good one to ask. Here's one that I definitely recommend. Ask, what do you believe about God and faith that you think I don't believe? That should give you some really good insight. Now let's move on to some different topics, some different examples. Here's some awkward worm can questions that you can ask about sex. Ask, have you ever had sex? Just pure and simple, straightforward, right? But because you need to get more specific than that, here's a great follow-up. Ask, do you think oral sex and anal sex are sex? I guarantee you statistics show that many students will say the answer to that is no. They don't think it's the same thing. And you can get specific with that and open up a can of worms, but it's going to give you great insight into their life. And don't forget about masturbation, all right? You didn't think we'd get through a conversation about parenting high school students without talking about masturbation, did you? Did you know that 80% of teenage boys masturbate before age 17? And did you also know that 20% of teenage boys have lied about masturbating by age 17 as well? That's just a stat I made up, right? But also teenage girls, 58% have masturbated before age 17 as well. This is something that they're going through, something they're dealing with, and you need to open that can of worms. So ask, have you ever masturbated? Do you think masturbation is okay or is it wrong? And I'm going to leave it there, right? That's enough about masturbation. But let me move on and tell you about another can of worms that you really do need to open. And this is not going to be a fun conversation. You need to open up a can and talk about breached boundaries in relationships. The CDC tells us that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or sexual assault. And here's why you need to open this can. 7% of minors are sexually assaulted by a stranger, and that's a horrible statistic. But what's even worse, 93% of sexual assault cases are from people you know. This means extended family, siblings, step-siblings, friends, teachers, coaches, babysitters. Your teenager needs you to open that can because the average child never reports sexual abuse. It more often comes out later in life through therapy. So here are some questions that I want to encourage you to ask when it comes to opening the can about breached boundaries. Does anyone in your life make you feel afraid or uncomfortable? Has anyone touched you in a way that you did not want them to? Has anyone asked you to not tell me something that they did to you? Such great questions to help give you insight into your teenager's life. Now, there are so many areas that require parents to take courage to open a can of worms. Friendships, dating, academics, social media, video games. And these questions and conversations are so necessary for helping your teenager move on the right path that leads to Jesus. Because if they're not being led by you, it's highly likely that they're not going to be led to Jesus in these areas of life. If you want examples of more worm can questions, go ahead and click on the Kids and Students tab at the top of this page. That's going to take you to the real life section of our website. And I had a team of people help me, just organize some worm can questions and conversation starters that you can ask your teenagers. And if they would serve you, just go ahead and use those. You'll find other parent resources there as well. All right, here is our third and final idea of how you can take courage in parenting during the high school years. Take courage to throw the Hail Mary. In common sense, it just makes so much sense if you want to lead your teenager down the right path, you got to start as a baby, right? The chance of you making a bigger difference, the biggest difference in the life of your teenager is to start young and to do that consistently over 18 years of life. But I know that's not the case with many people listening today. it's late in the game, and for whatever reason, you feel so far behind what you think you need to do as a parent in the life of your teenager. But let me tell you from experience that it's not too late. A Hail Mary is a prayer that's commonly said by Catholics, but when it comes to football, a Hail Mary is a last-ditch effort pass, usually from really far away in desperation when a team is down and time is running out. Now, a Hail Mary pass is only used because a team did not play well enough during the game to be in the lead at the end, so they're giving it all they got with one last effort, really hoping for a miracle. And now, according to ESPN, only 9.7% of Hail Mary passes are completed successfully. This is an extremely low percent rate. But do you know what has an even lower percent rate? Giving up. Taking the loss without putting up a fight, leaving the field completely, right? If you're parenting teenagers, you may not have a lot of time left with them. Some of you have seniors in your home. You only have 4 months left with your teenager in your house. For your junior, they have 16 months. Your sophomore has 22 months. Your freshman has 34 months left. I think for some of us, it feels like the end of the game. The clock is winding down and you feel so very far behind, but I want to encourage you, don't give up. Throw the Hail Mary pass. Now, I was raised in a split home. My mom was a Christian and my dad was agnostic at best. My dad, he was really a good dad. But he was far from God. He did not lead me and my brother and my sister on the right path that leads to Jesus. He didn't guide me in the deeper issues that we've been talking about today and the issues related to faith that I was asking and struggling with during my teen years. He really did love us. He really did love his family. But when it came to what he thought his greatest contribution to parenting over the years was that he was more about work, more about success, more about making money. The common thread, the common theme that I remember from my youth and into my teenage years was that my dad constantly would tell me that he wanted me to get good grades so I could get into a good college, so that I could get a good job, so that I could make lots of money and be rich. Life was all about being successful. And that's how my dad parented for 18 years of my life. When I was a senior in high school, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He went through radiation treatment and he had surgery to remove it, and everything seemed like it was going well. It seemed like he was on the road to recovery. But the fall of my freshman year of college, the cancer came back. And this time it was obvious that the cancer wasn't going anywhere. It was there to stay. The church that we were a part of at the time rallied around my family. They supported us in just unimaginable ways, so much so that my dad saw the love of Jesus through their actions, and he turned his life over to Jesus. He became a Christian when I was 19 years old. And about 9 months before my dad passed away, everything about him changed. He followed Jesus with his life. He encouraged us, my brother and sister, my family, to follow Jesus with our lives. We had spiritual conversations. He wouldn't stop talking to us about God, what he's done in his life, what he wants God to do in our lives. And here's what struck me the most. For my whole life, my dad had told me, get a good job, get rich, be successful. But in the end, all that changed. Some of the last words that my dad ever said to me were, Robbie, I want you to love people the way that our church has loved our family through all this. And those words from my dad in the last few months of his life, that's the main reason I'm a pastor today. If my dad was here, he would agree with this. My dad missed out on so much spiritual guidance that he could have had in my life growing up, but he didn't give up. As his time was running out, he threw a Hail Mary. His past connected, and in my opinion, he won the parenting game. Parents, no matter where you're at in your parenting journey, no matter how far behind you feel, no matter how exhausted you are, no matter how much the sea anemone has stung you, no matter how many cans of worms you have left to open, don't give up. If you still have breath in your lungs, you still have a chance to parent in a way that leads your kids to Jesus. If you have young kids, start now at a young age to direct your kids on the right path. If you have teenagers and just a little time left, throw that Hail Mary. Invest in your own faith. Invest in the faith of your teenager. Go all out and do all you can to lead your teen in the path that leads to Jesus. Because if you don't lead your teen, someone else will. Take courage to direct your children, your teenager, on the right path, the path that leads to Jesus. And when they're older, they will not leave it. Now, it's not a promise, but it's the absolute best course of action you can take when it comes to parenting. And to that end, let me pray for you. God, parenting at any age takes courage. I pray for supernatural strength when it comes to the parents listening today, for whatever parenting season they might find themselves in, but especially for parents of teenagers. I pray that they would understand and really truly believe that the path that leads to you is the best path possible. I pray that you would give them the courage to lean in when their teenager is pushing away. I pray that you would give them the courage to bring up the conversations that they need to have in order to lead their teenager on the right path. I pray, Lord, that they would not give up, but that they would turn to you for their strength so that they can lead their kid, their teenager, with whatever time they have left with them. And God, where every parent feels weak, where they feel inefficient, where they feel unsuccessful, where they feel like they have failed, I pray that you would be their strength, that you would be their hope, and that you would be their guide. And I pray this in Jesus' name, amen.